Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I hope you're all doing well today. I have a message for someone who is ready to emerge from the darkness. And don't get me wrong, I love the darkness myself, but we tend to go through different periods in our life where sometimes we're in the dark, sometimes we're in the light. And I get the sense that I'm talking to someone who is ready to emerge into the light, and perhaps a sort of spotlight. Alright, so we have the Ace of Swords. So there is this feeling of a new thought. Maybe there's some new idea that you have to share with the world, or maybe a new idea that you're having about your life's purpose and what you could be doing with your time, what you want to share with the world. And I feel like there's this sort of inner guide that you have within you that's pointing you to take certain actions. And maybe this has been going on for a long time, but more recently some of these actions have been relating to things that would put you in the public eye, whether this just means doing activities in your community where you're being seen in the public, or maybe presenting some sort of project that has a public-facing side, or just being more active on social media, or putting yourself out there in general. Alright, so we have the Ten of Wands. So there is this feeling of carrying some sort of heavy burden. So that's the sense that I'm getting is in this period of darkness, you've been building up a lot of material, whether this is literal material or more like a psychic material or just some sort of baggage. But I'm getting the sense that you have a lot that you're carrying, and it's almost like your burden will be lightened when you show this to the world. So when you emerge from the darkness and bring the things that you've acquired in the darkness into the light, it's like this load is taken off of your shoulders. So I get the sense that it could be something that, it's not necessarily negative that you're carrying this burden with you. Like, of course, this is a valuable material, but it's like, it gets to a certain point where you've carried it with you so long that you need to give it away, essentially. Alright, so we have the High Priestess. What a beautiful card. She's like a fairy on a pile of skulls. So there's a sense that you have very strong intuitive gifts and that you're connected to some sort of spiritual tradition that is much larger than yourself, where not all of your knowledge happens to exist just in the conscious realm. And this is where the darkness could be an aspect to acquiring some new knowledge or thriving in the sense, where your intuition might simply work better under the light of the moon, where sometimes daylight could actually be overwhelming, could give you a lot of signals or inputs that could distract you from this fine thread of knowledge that you've been following. But at the same time, there is the sense that people are better able to see your gifts when you emerge into the daylight or into the spotlight. So sometimes being lost in the darkness could relate to getting connected to perhaps energies that don't necessarily relate to the mortal realm, where maybe you're connecting to spiritual energies or like past life energies. The spirit realm is what I'm getting. Like maybe you've been connecting to people who have passed away, whether this be family members, friends, or perhaps just historical figures, or people in general, kind of just the passage of time. Maybe you really enjoy looking at photos of people who have passed away, and not in this morbid sense, but just it helps you connect to perhaps past periods in time where it's almost like time travel, or you could imagine yourself existing as the human consciousness in whatever time period that you're looking at. Or it could even go back further than that, like to artifacts before photography even existed. So I'm getting the sense that you have this really strong connection to the spiritual realm, and that this is something that you want to bring into your day-to-day life or into the daily life of the people around you. Maybe sharing some of this knowledge that you've acquired in the darkness and using it to illuminate the lives of other people who maybe don't have this really strong intuitive or deeper spiritual connection themselves. That it's almost like you're a channel for some of these energies to open it up and bring the wisdom towards people who maybe simply thrive more in the light. Alright, we have the Lovers. So maybe there's this feeling of some of this darkness could have been related to some feelings of heartbreak, or there's also a feeling of traveling down different paths. And then the text on this card says blood bound. So it's almost like maybe you've made some sort of pact. Perhaps this is like a soul contract, you could say, of maybe this was something relating to your life's purpose that, before you were brought into this mortal realm, there was something in your life's purpose that related to these periods of darkness and periods of light, where maybe this darkness could have felt isolating at times, or depressing, or just this feeling like you weren't really sure what you were supposed to do, definitely feeling ostracized from society or feeling isolated in some way. But it was almost as if these periods of darkness were meant to give you the knowledge that you needed to have, like this vast quantity of material that you were meant to share with the world, and these more intuitive spiritual powers that needed to be developed in a period of isolation. And there's the sense that you're bringing some new knowledge or a new way of living to the world through this. And this could also relate to some balanced feeling of a masculine and feminine polarity within yourself as well, where understanding these two energies, or just simply understanding the union of opposites in general, was something that had to be done in the dark, or perhaps apart from interacting with other people or society at large, where to bring this union to light, you had to go through the darkness of it. Like maybe a dark night of the soul is coming through. Maybe you went through a period where maybe you felt kind of hopeless, or again, like isolated, where it felt like you didn't really have any help in the world. But now it feels like it's like you're bringing new light to the world after emerging from the darkness. Right, we have the Ten of Swords. So this is this feeling of like very much a darkness. I feel like this is telling a little bit of a story about some of the things that you've went through, where carrying this burden, but then at the same time feeling very weighed down by it, or almost like you kind of reached a breaking point where you really felt like, okay, it's over, and you let yourself die in a way where you gave yourself to the darkness fully, and not in some sort of evil way, but it's almost like this feeling of like closing your eyes when you die and just like letting it wash over you, and just like, you know how in movies, or probably in real life too, I've never personally witnessed someone die, but in movies they're always like, keep your eyes open, like stay with us, stay awake, and then the person closes their eyes and then they go really peacefully. It's not always like that. Sometimes people can get pretty worked up in their moment of death, but that's kind of the sense I'm getting, is you allowed that to happen, where you closed your eyes and let yourself die in this darkness, and then you were reborn anew. It was like you came out of that experience completely transformed. So this could relate to some sort of ego death experience that you might have had, and definitely a sense of transformation through letting parts of yourself die. All right, we have the World, and I was talking recently about the union of opposites, right? And we have this kind of yin-yang thing going on with the Reaper and a very beautiful woman, which is kind of a contradiction, because usually the yin is more relating to a feminine energy, whereas the yang is the masculine, so it's kind of reversed in this card. But it's interesting, we have kind of like a heaven and hell theme going on as well. There's this feeling of like death and life, death and the maiden kind of theme of like it's almost like something you might hold inside of yourself, where you have a kind of a youthful or lively beauty to you, but you also have this darkness that could seem kind of gothic or dark in some ways too. Where, like I mentioned, I think you're really connected to the spiritual realm and to the realm of the dead, where I feel like this is kind of a polarity you hold inside yourself. Like I was talking about the union of masculine and feminine that you might hold within yourself, you also hold this union of life and death, where it's like you have a very strong understanding of your own mortality, this fact that you will die, that you are only, just here for a brief moment in your existence, and this struggling with your own mortality could have led to this feeling of darkness inside of you as well, where it could have almost been this feeling of having given up, like I mentioned, of just, if I'm going to die, then what's the point, right? But then I think you allowed yourself to die on that level, and it gave you new life, where essentially, like your ego died, but you spiritually ascended, or like a new self kind of entered the ground, of like a new player has entered the battle, is the message I'm getting, is like you allowed your ego to die in order for your higher self to work through your physical form. And this is essentially what is stepping into the light now, is like this previous version of you had to go into the darkness because there was something there that it had to find. And it was kind of like the hero's journey is what I'm getting. It's like you travel into the abyss and then you come back and you've returned with new knowledge, with new abilities. And this is a process that you'll go through several times in your life. Like, I get the sense that this is something you regularly do or you have done before, is going into this darkness and coming into the light. But every time it's like you ascend higher and higher, where new abilities and new knowledge is given to you, where maybe previously it was like on a smaller scale, where maybe it could have even been like really basic things. Like maybe there was a period of time in your life where you didn't speak much, and then you went into this darkness of really being completely isolated from society, of like not speaking at all. And then when you re-emerged, you had found your voice and you simply spoke a lot more. Or there was a period of time where you didn't show your work or anything that you were doing to other people, and then you emerged and then you had a lot more to share. But I feel like it can go through more dramatic ascensions where maybe there was like the darkness gets even darker and then the light gets even brighter. So there might be a period of time where you are completely isolated from society, maybe not speaking to people in general, or simply disappearing from the world, and maybe relating to even more of like an emotional intensity too of this darkness. And then when you came back, it was like you had acquired some sort of new gift. Right, so we have the Six of Pentacles. So there is this feeling of generosity, of like, it's almost like you're entering the light, not for your own benefit alone, but also for the benefit of others. Like, this period in the darkness has made you more spiritually rich, so that you have more of this energy to give away to other people. And it's like you can offer them some sort of blessing in this way, where your connection to the spiritual world allows you to give away gifts that are almost more beneficial than any sort of material gift. Although I feel like at the same time, the material and spiritual worlds are connected in a sense, so that you might acquire more spiritual riches through this practice too, or maybe that the messages that you might bring to people could lead them to acquiring more material wealth as well. Where there's a sense that people could sometimes lose hope in some ways, and I feel like what you are bringing to them, the gift that you are giving to them quite generously, is a spark of hope, which is the spark that carried you through these periods of darkness in your life. That kind of light at the end of the tunnel, or that kind of angel that descended in that moment of closing your eyes and allowing yourself to die. And there's this feeling that you brought back that spark with you. You've carried the torch, and it now burns even brighter, and that is something you're able to give to people, right? Like, if you're able to find the light in the darkness, it's so much easier for you to find that light in the light, right? So when people are kind of feeling hopeless or pessimistic, or perhaps feeling like they are out of touch with their life's purpose, I feel like it's something you're able to very easily convey to them because you found that for yourself. All right, we have the Knight of Cups. So there is this feeling of offering something up, almost like a ritual offering, is the sense that I'm getting, and I feel like this kind of corresponds to this Ten of Swords energy, where you allowed yourself to die in a way, where you would come to this crossing point, and that's kind of the sense I'm getting, is again like this crossing the abyss, and it was like you offered yourself up as this vessel, or you offered up your blood in a way. Kind of this, yeah, definitely this ritual kind of blood sacrifice feeling is what I'm getting. Maybe this could have even corresponded to some literal experience you had involving losing some blood. But there was this feeling of offering yourself up in this very ritualistic way, almost as like a sacrifice, or like as a warrior, of committing yourself to a cause. And this could have been something that occurred long before you even consciously were aware of any of these traditions, or maybe it was something you could have picked up like very young. Perhaps you read a book on vampires or something like that, and it was something that maybe ingrained itself in your subconscious. Some of these occult messages were taught to you perhaps very young, before you realized that they had anything to do with the spiritual world. You might have thought that it was just like, oh, kids love zombies and vampires and that sort of thing, but it was maybe something that had been ingrained in you before you fully knew. But it is like, again, with this feeling of the Lovers, of this blood bound, of some sort of spiritual contract in a way, where it was like this was something that your soul had essentially committed to. And maybe there's some feelings of rewards that are coming from walking this journey as well, where you were offering yourself up to this higher purpose in some ways, not just out out of a sense of nobility or out of sacrifice. Like there is definitely the sense of this Christ-like sacrifice of becoming your own Christ in a way of yeah, like definitely like this feeling of like how Christ gave up his blood so that people could drink it as wine, essentially. There is this feeling that you are sacrificing yourself in that way, but I think that there is also a due reward coming from that, and the reward is sort of this redemption of going into the dark and then becoming bathed in the light, of being cleansed or purified in some way. So it could have almost been like some sort of past life karma could be related to this, of like maybe there was something like a little bit demonic in your past or something, and this was like something you had to cleanse from yourself, of working out that karma, of then becoming more immersed in the light after like maybe there's like this feeling of like these dark and light past lives as well, or maybe entire lives were committed to the darkness and entire lives are committed to the light, where I feel like in this life, even though you go through these periods of darkness that may seem more pronounced than other people around you, you are predominantly working in the light. But it's almost like there's something about your soul or about your spiritual body that is very well acquainted with the darkness. All right, and we have the Two of Pentacles. So there's a sense of infinite choice or holding things in a balance, of this kind of tension. And again, there is this really strong sense of some sort of ritualistic practice that might also involve burning things. But the sense that I'm getting is you kind of open yourself up to the infinite possibilities, which is something that is, again, something you can be very generous about granting to other people, is when people operate so much in the light of day, they receive a lot of messages coming through these very like 3D channels, right? Of advertisement, of things that other people have told them, like parents or teachers or their peers around them, really getting immersed in this kind of hamster wheel of existence, you might say. Where I feel like something that you are able to pick up on is this infinite possibility within every moment that goes far beyond any sort of social convention or what is expected of us, what we're told will make us successful in the world. And I feel like you have kind of cleansed yourself, like in this darkness, in this abyss where there was essentially nothing, you also realized that there was everything. And then this allowed you to understand the wider range of possibilities for yourself in every moment and in your life at large. And I feel like this is something that you can grant to other people as well, where it's almost like they have a limited scope of vision from being in the light, where when you're in the light for too long, you can only see the light. Like the sense I'm getting is like an animal, like a human, right? If you take a human or a raccoon and you put them in a dark alleyway, the raccoon is just going to see more of what's happening, where the human could maybe miss out on some wonderful treasure that's on the ground, whereas the raccoon will see it. Although maybe the raccoon wouldn't know that it's a treasure because it's not a human. But anyway, that's kind of the sense that I'm getting, is like you can kind of point people in the direction of things that are gold for them, right? Like it doesn't really matter to you, right? As a raccoon, you don't really need money. But if someone was walking down an alleyway, they would be very happy to find a $100 bill on the ground, right? So that's kind of the sense I'm getting, is like you can see better in the darkness so that you can point people towards what is good for them or what they want, maybe perhaps on a higher level than just what they want in their conscious mind, but truly what their soul wants is something that I think you're able to see. And I think you're able to perceive how people could execute this in their real life. And kind of juggling all the different possibilities. I think it's something that you're able to kind of seize, like you can almost freeze time in a way and pull possibilities out of the air. All right, so we have the Emperor, and this is, ooh, he's like a mummified emperor from like a pharaoh. So the sense I'm getting, and there's also this feeling of a third eye chakra could be important to you in this case, where again, like you're having this higher feeling of perception, like a heightened sense of perception in some ways, where I feel like, yeah, being in the darkness allows you to perceive more, just especially when it comes to spiritual matters, to the point where when you are operating in the light, you're able to see perhaps some aspect of people's spiritual bodies or of their desires on more of a soul level, where you can kind of see people's highest purpose or like essentially like their soul contract. It's almost like you can read them off of people's foreheads, where it's like hovering above their heads, where like if you've ever seen in like a sci-fi movie, or there's this, I don't know what movie this is, but there's probably a bunch of them where it's like people have like a timer above their heads, or they have some sort of color associated with them. The Divergent series of books, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, is like you can perceive that when you see other people, and you can kind of point them towards that. And again, it's like this guiding kind of feeling, is like you have this leadership quality about you, where it's almost like you tell people what they need to do, but it's also like you don't necessarily tell them in just like a straightforward way of like, I think you should do this. It's almost like you have like a leadership quality that allows you to see what is best for people. Like, something I'm getting is like you're the voice of the people. You know what is the best for society in some ways. But again, it's like, it's not like you're directly telling anyone this. It's like you're leading them to their highest purpose or their highest good for themselves, but you're just pointing them in the direction, because it's so much more valuable when they get to that point for themselves. Or like, it wouldn't really resonate if they just were told the information directly, right? That's why they have to be told maybe in vague allusions or in symbolism, so that they can come to that conclusion for themselves, because that is where the reward is earned for discovering their own purpose. But it's like you're pointing them towards it. And I feel like you also have this really, like, yeah, like a strong leadership quality where people almost trust you. And I feel like it's having traversed that darkness that has given you some of that strength, where it's almost like you wouldn't follow a leader if they had never fought in a battle, where they would almost feel like a little bit of a poser, is kind of the sense I'm getting, right? It's like, how could you know anything about like sending soldiers into battle if you haven't fought yourself? So there's this sense of you have fought, and this makes you more respected or more revered, where again, it's like you can perceive certain things about people, but they can also perceive this about you, or maybe it's something you don't perceive about yourself because you spend so much time with yourself, but you probably perceive this in other people, so you might know what I'm talking about, is this darkness that some people carry with them, that it just kind of gives you the sense of like, oh, you've been through it, or like, you know how bad it gets, right? And I think that's something you perceive about other people, and I think people perceive that about you as well. But people who haven't been through this themselves, they don't get that same energy of like real recognize real, of like, oh, I know that you've suffered. People who haven't suffered to that extent, I feel like they see it more as just a strength or a power, like this leadership quality is the sense that I'm getting of like, oh, this is a very empowered person. This is someone who has a lot to share with the world. This is someone who has really strong leadership abilities. This is someone who simply is really confident and really knows what they want, knows what they're doing, knows their purpose in life. That's kind of the sense that I'm getting that radiates off of you, your aura, one could say. Alright, let's draw one more card to wrap up this reading about emerging from the darkness into the light. Okay, the Magician. So I feel like you're emerging from the darkness with newfound powers and abilities, perhaps powers and abilities that you never thought you could have, or that you thought were made up. Like, you thought they were in fairy tales. You thought it was just like wizards. They exist in fantasy books. But I think you're starting to understand that you genuinely have some higher levels of power that you didn't think were possible before, especially when it relates to carrying something from the darkness into the light. And I think that your interactions with other people are of the utmost importance in this matter. But also at the same time, I'm getting like this kind of sense of an alchemist, of a magician, where you're like discovering the Philosopher's Stone, which I think relates to your own, like, you can see he's holding this glowing orb, which could also relate to kind of carrying the torch, like I mentioned, of bringing this light, but also it's like creating this Philosopher's Stone, which is your core sense of self, like your true individuality, on a higher level than just like the level of personality, but truly at your core, acting from this core sense of self. And I feel like that's something you're able to do. And of course it relates to perhaps alchemizing certain feelings or sensations on like the more psychological level, but there's also a sort of spiritual alchemy that is taking place, in which you could see it as like a seed being planted that is then growing into the lotus flower, or perhaps the birthing of a new spiritual body that starts as an embryo. And it's almost something that is not so conscious on the level of like when people talk about psychological alchemy, of like doing shadow work, or like, oh, I have this thought, so I'm going to alchemize it, right? It's on a much finer level that relates to just the production of perhaps finer substances in your physical or spiritual body, where just over time these this body or this philosopher's stone, the magnum opus, is being cultivated within you. And it's something that takes place in a very long-term scale, but that these periods of darkness and light could be integral to it. You could look at it sort of as the passing of days, right? Like when you think about a field or a plant that's growing, right? The sunlight is essential for the plants to grow, but it passes in the time of like 24-hour day cycles, right? But you could look at this plant or seed, the lotus flower that is growing within you, as similarly needing that sunlight or this day-night cycle, but that these take place on a larger scale, like perhaps taking periods of weeks, months, or years of your life where the day cycle is just a little bit different. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. And as always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you're interested in booking a personalized reading, feel free to email me. They are $25 until the end of February. After that, the prices will be going up, so please book your readings now if you're interested. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.